Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our webinar today, Wellness Workout Cardio for Your Compliance Review. My name is Amanda, and I'll be your moderator. ERISA attorney Larry Grigine is our presenter. As always, Larry's slides are packed with info, so if you missed something, don't worry. We'll be emailing you a recording and the slides after the webinar concludes. I'll be keeping the webinar muted to avoid any background noise, but if you have any questions, just type them in the box below, and I'll read them aloud for you. Our next webinar will be on July 11th at 1 p.m. Central, and we'll be covering HIPAA. For now, I'm going to turn the presentation over to our Chief Marketing Officer, Julia.
And good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining this Benefit Express webinar. As you know, our featured speaker, Larry, has been a partner to Benefit Express and is a wealth of information. I'm looking forward to turning it over to him in just a moment. But before we do, I'd like to tell you about a quiz that we use to gauge your readiness from a wellness perspective. So this topic is all about how well and prepared your organization is. So to help us guide on the content, we'd like to ask you to weigh in and give us some feedback on the questions that you can see on the screen. Not only will this help us tailor our content for you in the future, it will also give you a moment to take a time out and judge how you and your organization are doing. So while you see the quiz on the screen, I'll give you a moment to take a look. I'm seeing participation numbers coming in, and looks like you're giving us some feedback. Some participants are indicating that they are making changes. Others are indicating that these are early stages. We're educating ourselves on what's available in the marketplace. And some of you are saying we're fit and feeling fine. We have a solution and we're very pleased with it. So with about 50% of the listeners voting, I'll ask you to make your final selection in just another minute. While this remains on screen, I'm so pleased to have an opportunity to introduce Larry, who has been a partner to Benefit Express and also an expert resource, speaking nationally and certainly is well known as a topic expert. While I transition to introduce his feedback and how he will help us guide you today on these topics, I'm giving you a moment to complete your readiness quiz, and looks like we've got almost 75% voted. So Larry is an attorney practicing exclusively in the field of employee benefits. He has experience in dealing with qualified plans, health and welfare, fringe benefits, and executive compensation areas. With more than 35 years experience in employee benefit law, he has extensive practice advising on all aspects of employee benefit law, including drafting and reviewing individually designed and prototype retirement plans, employee stock ownership plans, due diligence on employee benefit issues for merger, acquisition and outsourcing transactions, as well as advising on administrative and design issues, including qualified retirement plans. Larry was also an faculty member of John Marshall's Law School, LLM program in employee benefits, and at the Valparaiso University School of Law. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Larry to take it away.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. What's very important is this area is extremely complicated. Now, as we go through the presentation, I packed in a lot of material. I may not I'll be able to cover every aspect of a slide, but I'll give you the nuance so you can go back and look at it. The reason why this area is extremely complicated, if you look at slide 4, anytime you put in a wellness program, you have to meet the requirements of HIPAA, Internal Revenue Code, GINA, ERISA, ADA, and also it impacts your compliance with ACA. There's a lot of things, so many moving parts in wellness programs. It's really tough to get your hands around everything, and I'm going to try to give you a nuance and try for you to understand where the trouble spots in designing a wellness program. The first thing I'm going to do is talk about the wellness requirements under HIPAA. Now, generally, as slide 6 indicates, you cannot discriminate against someone because of a health condition. Discrimination encompasses eligibility. You can't say, no, you can't join the plan because you have an illness, effective date, waiting periods, or benefits if someone has a chronic condition. HIPAA says an employer and the employer plans have to ignore this. In addition to that, you cannot charge someone more of a premium because of a health condition. So determining rebates, discounts, differentials, the only exception to any of this is wellness programs. So what that means for an employer, in order to design a program with a discount or encourage people in wellness, basically you have to meet the requirements under the HIPAA regulations for wellness plans. And those requirements can be very difficult. And the violations for HIPAA non-compliance are $100 per day per person per failure and not complying with all the HIPAA regulations. Also, you can be discovered under DOL audit and civil action to enforce the rules. And also, if there could be a class action suit, for example, under ERISA Section 502. In addition to the Labor Department also, who has been active, and I'll be discussing this in a few minutes, EEOC has been suing employers over certain practices on wellness programs. So again, an employer has to think long and hard and be very careful in designing wellness programs. Now, wellness programs under the final regulations, the requirements vary depending on what your wellness program is. It can be what's called a health-contingent program, where basically you don't get a reward unless you meet certain requirements. You have to weigh a certain weight. You have to have, your cholesterol has to be a certain level. Those are called health-contingent programs. And many employers have those programs to encourage people to lose weight, to watch their cholesterol, to do various things that the employer thinks it's important. Many times for the employers, if they want to start with a wellness program, the best place to start wellness programs, as slide 8 indicates, is regard to participation programs, where if you take a health risk assessment, you get a reward. So it's not based on rewards, it's based on, as Woody Allen would say, showing up. So if you just take a wellness health risk assessment, if you do certain things, we don't care what the results is, by just showing up, you get a reward. So an employer, and basically many of the requirements under HIPAA programs are, if you go the second step in the health contingent programs. The first step is participation, and many employers start with a health risk assessment. That's the keystone in all this. So in a nutshell, as this slide indicates, the program is health contingent based. The final regulations have 5 requirements, which I'll go over. If it's participation based, the only requirement is you have to make sure your program is available to all similarly situated individuals. In other words, you can't have it just for the executives. It must be a broad-based program. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to include everyone. You could do a location or division in your company, but again, it can't be just for the executives. Now, what this slide indicates is the fact that wellness programs for many employers encompass all kinds of things. And the most important thing is to encourage healthier lifestyles. And many employers incentivize employees from doing this for reducing, they reduce premiums or co-pays in exchange for quitting smoking, reducing bad cholesterol levels, for example. And I think it's important to center on what you want to do as an employer. So employers and insurers hope that by encouraging healthier lifestyles, healthcare costs will be contained and reduced. And again, HHS has recommended that employers consider providing health promotion and wellness programs and disease management for employers as part of the health benefits. But again, you have to be decided to what you think is your issue or your problem. As this is, some wellness programs simply make certain services available. Others target individuals, especially disease management. They may have case managers, so it's up to you how you want to design this program. But rewards can be as very simple as offering wellness programs can vary from offering t-shirts and events and water bottles and offering, for example, free or reduced gym memberships. And many times with health contingent programs, the employer will set the standards, for example, quitting smoking, lowering cholesterol, and centering on various different conditions that they see as being troublesome for the employer. Now the keystone, as I indicated before, and this is in slide 11, is health risk assessments. And these health risk assessment, as the slide indicates, can be as sophisticated as a full exam or just a blood draw. But that's the keystone, because that's the starting point for many employers in designing their programs and making sure they understand what conditions that the employers are facing. And as this says, health risk assessments can be also much more than hands-on and can range from basic screenings at the employee's work site, which is blood pressure, cholesterol, body mass, blood sugar, bone density, to complete physical exams. So it's up to you how you want to start on this, but this is the cornerstone in designing your wellness programs and centering around what you think is important that your wellness program has to contain. Now, what's extremely important here also, and this is on slide 11, is the employer cannot make taking health risk assessments mandatory. You can give a reward for taking it. You can punish employees for not taking it, but you can't make it mandatory. And what's important in all these programs is the fact that all these programs have to be voluntary. Now again, participation-only programs do not condition eligibility, as this slide 12 indicates, for the reward upon the participant's ability to meet health contingent. So it's just showing up. So examples of participation-only programs are incentives to participate in health fair or testing, waiver of certain co-payments and deductibles for well baby care, reimbursement of health club memberships, reimbursement for smoking cessation programs. So again, just merely showing up and asking what the employer wants to do, many times employers have a reward for doing that, or they will not impose a penalty. And health contingent programs require individuals to satisfy a health contingent standard. And you as an employer can design, for example, losing weight, scoring at various levels on cholesterol, on various different avenues. So the reward involves an incentive in the form of a discount, waiver, cost-sharing amount, and I'll be talking about the certain requirements you have to meet and how much that benefit or that penalty can be in that situation. So health contingent programs are also subdivided between activity-based and outcomes-based. And activities-based, and what many employers do, they'll have exercise programs, walking programs, diet programs, and you have to meet certain goals in order to get the reward. And again, for outcomes-based programs, an employer can provide a reward for not smoking, for not obtaining a certain result in biometric screening, or obtaining a certain body mass index. So again, there's no standards of what you have to include. You can be very creative and put in exactly what you think is important for your employees. So on slide 15 are the 5 different requirements a health contingent-based program has to include. So the reward cannot be more than 30% of the cost and coverage, and the cost and coverage is the entire premium. So if the employee is only involved with the wellness program, it's 30% of the single premium, and that single premium is the whole premium, what the employer pays and what the employee pays. The program must be reasonably designed to promote health or prevent disease, which means it can't be a subterfuge to give the executives a discount. So it has to be there to improve health. The program must give individuals an opportunity to qualify for the reward at least once a year. So, and again, what concerns the government is that if you design a program, and very few people do qualify for rewards, there's going to be a conclusion there that your program is not really effective. What you want to do is make it attractive enough so people can get something. Maybe not the entire reward, but something in order to change the their activity. So again, once a year that person can requalify, and they can qualify and not qualify from year to year. The reward must be available to all similarly situated individuals. Again, what that means is you have to include enough employees where it's not discriminatory in favor of executives or owners. But again, you don't have to include all the population. You can include, for example, a location that you see that you're having health problems at, or a division of your company. And lastly, the plan must disclose all alternative health contingents or waivers. Now, you'll see this in the next few minutes. The government encourages employers when you design a program, and let's say you had a program where you have your cholesterol level has to meet a certain level. And you have an employee comes to you and said, listen, my family has a history of cholesterol, high cholesterol. I do everything I can. I exercise, my cholesterol never goes down. And I take medicine. I see my doctor every week. How can I qualify for this reward? And I think you can create an alternative for that employee as long as they document the fact that they see their doctor, they're taking their medicine, they exercise, even though the cholesterol doesn't go down and it's still high, they're still managing their cholesterol. It's not increasing, it's staying at a certain level, because some individuals cannot, no matter what they do, cannot change their cholesterol level. So what this slide does, and you can read this later, but what this slide is trying to say is that the reward must not be more than 30% of the cost and coverage. And again, as I said before, the 30%, if it's just the employee that's involved, it's 30% of the single coverage. And this is the maximum amount. Now for smoking cessation program, that can go up to 50%. But again, if just it can be designed as a discount or as a penalty. So as most employers do a discount. Penalty is too onerous, and I think it's not attractive to employees, so they see it as a discount. And again, the employees do not receive the discount or the reward until they qualify and they meet certain requirements. So you may want to do it before your plan year, you announce it, and then at renewal date, if that employee has met your requirements, then they get a discount on the reward. Or you can design it, say, every 6 months, reevaluate what you're doing, and then after 6 months, if that person, you see progress, then you give them either all or some of the benefit. So the program must be reasonably designed to promote health. The program meets this requirement as your reasonable chance of improving health. It's not overly burdensome. It's not a subterfuge or discriminating because of a health factor. And it's not highly suspect in method chosen. So it's got to be a broad-based, reasonable program that you cannot be designed only to give certain individuals a discount. So you got to be real careful in the designing the program so as many people as possible qualify. That's what that slide is trying to say. So there's no need for a scientific record. There are examples in the final regulations, but basically what most employers do, especially with health-based programs, they either have an activity-based or it's based on certain parameters that you feel is important: cholesterol level, body mass, weight, and it's broad-based. And I think that's what's very important. You don't want to make it extremely complicated. And if you have a program that very few people do qualify, that program is going to be deemed to be suspect. And again, the program must be give individuals an opportunity to qualify for reward at least once a year. And again, you can design it so it's the start of it is before the beginning of your annual enrollment, or you can design it that you roll it out at open enrollment, and as soon as they qualify during the year, they start getting the discount. That's what you have to do. Again, it doesn't have to be open to everyone. You can target certain individuals, target certain locations, but you have to have a broad-based program where enough individuals are participating. So that's what that slide 19 is trying to say. And again, this just goes on. You can offer the program to families. You don't have to offer to families. You can offer it to spouses. dependent children. The problem when you start including more people in the family, and suppose part of the family does qualify and the rest of the family does not qualify, are they entitled to reward if certain members do not participate or don't meet all the requirements? So it gets somewhat complicated. Now, what's very extremely important here, basically what you have to do, if an individual, for example, cannot meet the requirements of your program, you're required as an employer to advertise the fact that there are reasonable alternative standards to qualify. Now, in your notification to your employees indicating that there is a reasonable alternative, you have to indicate what that is. And when the government indicates the fact that basically an employer has to design a reward that is personalized for each employee. For example, if you have an exercise program and an employee says, well, my doctor says I can't do this type of exercise, but I can go swimming, I can do something else, you can change the program that that person can actually get the reward by doing another type of activity. So it has to be flexible and it has to be individualized for each employee. So for activity-based programs, it's permissible for a plan to require verification from a physician that the individual has such medical condition, but only if it's reasonable under the circumstance. I can't do certain diseases. Because if I have certain disease, I can't do various exercises. An outcome-based program, if an individual does not meet the target for an outcome-based program based on a measurement, test, or screening, the individuals must be provided with a reasonable standard regardless of any health condition or other health status to ensure the outcome. So you have to make it flexible enough in your program that that person does qualify. So you have to come up with an alternative. And for outcome, the reasonable alternative cannot be a requirement that meets a different standard of the same standard, a different level of the same standard. And an individual must be given the opportunity to comply with the recommendations of the individual's personal physician as a second reasonable standard. So you want to go back to their physician and say, oh, what can that person do, especially if it's an activity-based program. Under an outcome-based program, it's not reasonable to require verification that the health factor makes it unreasonable or difficult or medically inadvisable for an individual to satisfy a certain requirement. You basically have to take that person's word for it. And again, what this slide is trying to say, in designing a program, the reasonable standard, the crux of all this, and you can read this later, is basically you have to design the program a reasonable standard that's individualized for each person. And you have to be very careful to make sure that person can do that outstanding. And it can't be a variation of what your first standard is. You have to come up with something new. So it's got to be individualized. Now, you don't have to advertise what your standards are to the employees, but you just have to make them aware of the fact if you can't meet whatever we put up there as a program, come in, we'll talk about the standard, and we can find something that you can do that you can qualify. Now, if nothing else can be gotten, the employer has the alternative of just waiving the standard and say, okay, we'll give it to you. That's the last resort. And again, what I just said is in slide 24. Plans may always waive otherwise applicable standards instead of providing a reasonable standard. Additionally, plans do not need to establish a particular reasonable standard in advance of an individual's specific request for one as long as one is provided. And again, and I keep on repeating this, the crux of it is, as an employer, you have to come up with individual standards for the employees. Now, what you have to do, and what this slide indicates, is the fact that you have to indicate to the employees that reasonable standard, alternative standards are available, but you don't have to advertise the fact what those reasonable standards are. You have to inform the employees that they do exist. So your program has certain standards. You can say at the end, well, if you can't meet any one of these standards, come in, we'll talk about, and we'll come up with an alternative for you so you can qualify. So as this on the bottom of slide 25 says, if the program merely mentions the availability of a wellness program without describing the details, the reasonable alternatives do not need to be described in plan materials. Just the fact they exist, I think is important to understand. Amanda, do we have any questions, or should I move on?
How are some of the wellness plans getting around the rules? If I can say that and set up a wellness program of some kind and take a large portion of their paychecks pre-tax to then buy accident, cancer, and hospital policies?
Oh yeah, I'm very familiar with those. There were two recent memorandums that came out. One came out just a month ago in May, and basically it was a subterfuge to sell voluntary benefits. The IRS hammered them pretty hard on this, and basically it was a participation-based program where they were funneling money to the employees to buy fixed indemnity programs. And what the IRS said is if these contributions are pre-tax, any benefits coming out of these cancer policies or hospitalization policies or fixed indemnity would be taxable. So they weren't, so the IRS finally found them, are going to penalize them. And so employers basically what they have to do, if you're, and again, this is a perfect lead into the next one, wellness programs and income tax. Any wellness program that you funnel cash to employees, that cash would be taxable. But most employers in this situation is not to make the benefit taxable. Instead of giving them cash, either the cash goes into a flexible spending account or it's used, the reward is given back to the employees as a discount on their health plans. So those wellness programs have been basically hammered by the Internal Revenue Service and said if you either give cash or you funnel it through an FSA, and that FSA buys fixed indemnity programs, those benefits coming out would be taxable. So you're going to be very careful in regard to that. Any other questions?
If an employee does not meet the original requirement but then later achieves the RAS, the employee does receive any premium reduction available as an award, even going back to the beginning of the plan year, right? Is this what is meant by the full reward?
You can either do it backward or forward. It's up to you how you want to work it, but you have to communicate. And again, that's why I'm suggesting in this situation that you may want to do the requirements of the wellness program before the beginning of your open enrollment, so you can basically start all the rewards at the beginning of your plan year. But you don't have to do that. You can announce the program in open enrollment, and you can say to the employees, once you meet the requirements, the rewards will either be retroactive or they'll be proactive, or they'll be starting after we show evidence the fact you've met the requirements. So it's up to you how do you want to work it.
All right, and that's it for now.
Okay. Now remember is the fact that anytime you give a payment to the employees, unless it's covered by the Internal Revenue Code, that would be compensation. So here with the wellness programs and income tax, a wellness benefit that does not qualify is either a eligible medical expense or we call a fringe benefit would be taxable. So under IRS Memorandum 2016-22-31, cash or non-cash incentives, payments, rewards paid to an employee are not excludable from the employee's taxable income, as I just indicated. And that's why most employers in this situation, when they design the wellness program, they may give some cash. But what they do in this situation is they give the reward as a discount, the discount on the premiums that the employee pays. If you do that, then again, that would be non-taxable. So for purposes of income and employment taxes, cash payments, even small rewards for participating in a wellness program would would be taxable. Non-cash rewards, incentives or other benefits that are not medical would be taxable. And payments or reimbursements through a wellness program to reimburse employees for all the portion of the program if their cash benefits would be taxable. But again, if you only charge an employee a lesser amount, that discount would not be taxable. So again, the following items are excluded from income tax: benefits, services, and non-cash rewards or incentives that are medical care, for example, biometric screenings, smoking cessation programs, or health risk assessments. If you pay for that, would not be taxable. Rewards and incentives that qualify as de minimis fringe, which means it's 25, 50 bucks in value, and you can't redeem them in cash, would not be taxable. But again, enrolled participants participating in the specified no-cost wellness activities receive cash payments from a fixed payment program. Such payments exceed their after-tax programs. These payments would be taxable. So again, be very careful, and once you design your program, go to your accountant or your attorney and say, we're designing this program. Are these payments to the employees taxable? That's what I'm trying to say. And if it's designed as a discount program where you give an employees a discount on the amount they paid in the program, there would be no tax. But if you start giving cash payments to the employees, in that situation, those payments would be taxable. The only time I think it wouldn't be if the rewards, for example, are turned into flex credits or HSA contributions and made through a cafeteria plan. Those payments would not be taxable. And again, I go into avid detail about all these I've talked about in the last few minutes. So again, in designing your program, talk to your accountant or your attorney about whether any payments provided to the employees would be taxable. And that gives you a summary of exactly what the items are. But again, if you give employees cash, 9 times out of 10, that payment would be taxable. You want to make it so if it's a reimbursement of an expense for a medical expense, then it would not be taxable. But please be very careful. All right, the next item, which is very important, if you design a wellness program, and the wellness program includes, for example, medical care, which means diagnostic testing, preventive services, coaching, and those situations, those wellness programs would be considered a medical plan under ERISA. And because of that, you need a plan document and an SPD, summary plan description. And you may have to offer the wellness program under COBRA. So in some situations, if you have a very sophisticated wellness program, ERISA may apply, especially if you're providing medical services through the wellness program. For example, clearly a disease management program would be medical care, and that program would have to be in a plan document. So again, these requirements have to be met. Next, programs under GINA. Now GINA comes in. GINA comes in this situation if you start collecting as part of your questionnaire any family history or other genetic information. Genetic information includes collection of family medical history. So any wellness programs that provide rewards for completing health risk assessments that request genetic information, you have to be very careful, because basically if you do that, you can't base the rewards on the results of that testing. It's extremely important. So that result, even if the rewards are not based on the income outcomes, you can't use. So genetic information can be collected as long as no rewards are provided, and if the request is made prior to the connection of enrollment. A group health plan or health insurer can provide rewards for completing a health risk assessment as long as no genetic information is collected. So you have to look at the health risk assessments and you look at the questionnaire to make sure that's the situation. So under a prior authorization, an employer offering an incentive to an employee for an employee's spouse to complete an HRA or biometric testing must obtain voluntary written authorization from the spouse, and a written authorization must describe the type of genetic information collected. So again, stay away from genetic information. Now, also one thing on GINA that the EEOC indicated, and some employers are doing this in the past. As part of the wellness program, if you didn't take the health risk assessment, they would limit what health plans you could participate under. What the EEOC said, you can't do that. There can't be any gateway plans where employees are prohibited from participating under a wellness program under a medical program because they didn't complete the health risk assessment. So you can't penalize, you can't prohibit or restrict access to a health plan just because somebody didn't cooperate and voluntarily participated under a wellness program. And basically what the EEOC said, incentives for child participation are prohibited, incentives for information from children are prohibited, and the prohibition applies to both minor and adult children. Also, what the EEOC said, there can't be, there must be separate incentives for employees and spouses. An employee cannot be penalized because a spouse didn't meet the requirements. You can't deny a individual a reward for a spouse not meeting that requirement. Also, in regard to incentives limited to 30%, what the EEOC said, any incentives, even if the whole family does participate, must be limited to 30% of the cost of self-only coverage. HIPAA, under the HIPAA regulations, it wasn't the case. Under the EEOC, they said very specifically, it must be limited to 30% of the cost of individual coverage. So the regulations are effective now. That's what this slide indicates. And then the EEOC did additional regulations on Americans with Disabilities Act. Again, under the ADA, there cannot be any gateway plans where you prohibit participation just because you didn't participate under a wellness program. And you cannot discriminate against someone because a wellness or disease management program that requires disabled individuals to participate in order to obtain benefits equal to those offered to non-disabled individuals would be a violation of HIPAA. So you can't deny any health plan to an individual just because the fact they didn't participate. And again, the ADA, for example, limits the circumstance under which an employer may require employees to undergo physical examinations to provide answers to medical inquiries. The prohibition on medical examinations or inquiries is subject to some exceptions, including an exception that permits employees to conduct voluntary medical examinations and inquiries as part of the employee health plan, either a wellness program or disease management. But again, the important word here is it's got to be voluntary. And you cannot, and again, the only time you can penalize an employer under ADA is if it's under a wellness program. Also under the ADA, the EEOC said there's new notice requirement. For a wellness program to be considered voluntary, it must meet certain requirements. And one of these requirements is a notice requirement. Employees participating in a wellness program that involves disability-related inquiries or medical examinations must be given a notice that describes the type of information to be collected, the purpose for the information to be used, the restrictions on disclosure of information, the employee representatives or other parties for whom the information will be shared, and the methods used to ensure the information will be reasonably disclosed. This notice has to be given to employees. So if you're running a wellness program, make sure you give your employees this notice just to make sure they're aware of how this information is going to be used. And then in regard to under the EEOC, if you do any testing for tobacco use, if you do medical testing, what the EEOC said is that if you do any testing, the cap on any rewards is limited to 30%. This describes exactly that method in that regard. So again, if you don't do medical testing for tobacco use, that reward can go as high as 50%, but if you do any testing, again, it's limited to 30%. And this goes into more details. Under the EEOC rule, a program would be subject to total incentive of up to 30%. This limitation applies if the program involves any medical examination, like a test administered as part of biometric testing in order to test for tobacco use. So again, be very careful in how you run that. Now, it's also very important that, and sometimes when people run wellness programs or sponsor wellness programs, they forget about HIPAA privacy, and the EEOC was very, very particular in regard to this. There's confidentiality protections. You have to make sure in this situation, because you're collecting medical information, that medical information is PHI and has to be protected. And many times employers put a wall between the wellness provider and them, and they may not get any particular results in regard to that biometric testing. So please be very careful, and if you're not HIPAA compliant now, you basically have to get HIPAA compliant if you want to see any of that information that's individualized for any employee, because that is considered to be HIPAA, subject to HIPAA privacy, and it's considered to be PHI. So make sure that you create a wall between your wellness provider and you only get summary information in regard to that information. So again, these regulations are effective for 2017. So again, these rules, you have to be in compliance now. So let's look at ACA, how this really affects ACA. Remember, under ACA, in order to keep grandfather status, deductibles, co-pays, co-insurance premiums, especially employer contributions, cannot vary by certain percentage points. I think it's 5%. If an employee qualifies and non-qualifies for wellness benefits, it could primarily affect your grandfather status. So again, some employers don't worry about it, and some employers are very particular in protecting their grandfather status. Employer mandate. To avoid employer mandate, penalty premiums for coverage may not exceed 9.69 of the employee's household income. If 1 year an employee does qualify and the next year doesn't qualify, it could affect affordability determination under the employer mandate. And we should know the next few weeks and months whether the employer mandate is going to survive, but it's still here. And the IRS has proposed the affordability of the employer-sponsored plan is determined by assuming that each employee fails to satisfy. So basically, in regard to tobacco use and other uses, the rules in regard to that, for tobacco use, you assume that you do qualify. For all other purposes of wellness, it is that you don't qualify, so you can use the higher premium. Do we have any questions?
Just a moment. Pardon me. From the previous question, it's following up. It's the understanding of some people that having a full reward available to the person means that the full value of the potential reward must be available to a person who meets the program requirements later in the year. In other words, if a premium reduction of $10 per month was available for non-smokers and a person who smoked did the RAS and completed it in the third month of the year, then that person should get $30 plus the $10 premium reconciliation each month going forward. Is this how you see it, or is it enough to provide the $10 per month going forward?
It all depends how you design your wellness program. If you design your wellness program so you have to be smoke-free for a period of months until you meet that requirement, until you complete, it all depends how you communicate to the employees, whether it's retroactive or it's going to be prospective. So you have to design your program accordingly.
All right.
You can do it one way or the other.
That's all for right now. All the questions, Larry, if you could hit the next slide for me.
Sure.
I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of background about benefitexpress since we have a few extra minutes. benefitexpress helps participants understand and use their benefits wisely so that they can be accountable for their health care. We enable you as the plan sponsor to enable and deliver your benefit strategy. We have worked with complicated health plans before. We can help you implement your wellness program across your benefits, make sure that everybody has the right rate going forward. Next. We have over 250 employees serving our clients from our 2 service centers, both Schaumburg, Illinois, which is where I am, and Rancho Cordova in California. We have over 226 mid to large administration clients. Our average client size is over 4,000 lives. We have over 3,500 technology clients, over 175 reimbursement and COBRA clients, over 1.5 million administration participants, and over 250,000 ACA 1095 forms generated last year. So we're really cranking them out recently. If you'll hit the next slide. Here are some of our partners. We're really big on, we know that you want your technology to integrate with all of your other systems. We have a full service HRIS and payroll system coming out with Summit Payroll called BC Edge. We also work with Optum to provide HSAs as well as several other brokers to make sure that you're getting the best team behind you. If you have any other questions, you can contact us at sales@mybenefitexpress.com. For now, are there any other questions about the webinar today?
If you have any questions, please contact. If you want any information about what someone mentioned in regard to the new ruling in regard to the wellness programs, let me know, and I've just did a report on that, and I can send it to you. So just send me an email, and I can let you know exactly what happened. And basically, there are a number of different companies that were selling wellness programs, and part of the program was that you would generate wellness credits, and the credits would then be used as flex credits to be used to buy certain fixed indemnity programs, cancer programs, basically, the programs that Aflac would sell. And those would be pre-tax contributions. And then you would buy those on a pre-tax basis. The IRS said very clearly in this situation that those benefits coming out of that program would be taxable. Now the problem with that situation is the employer may not know that the employer is receiving those benefits. So if you want any information about that ruling, it was a Chief Counsel memorandum. If you want any information in regard to that, let me know, and I can send you the chapter and verse on that, okay?
All right, thank you guys so much for joining us. Again, our next webinar is July 11th, and we will, again, at 1 p.m. Central, and we'll be covering HIPAA. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.